All right, everybody. This is the next video in our series here of Paul converting his cargo trailer into a small camper or a large teardrop. And in the last couple of videos, we did a walk around the trailer itself. We did a walk around the trailer and talked about the floor plan and the options. Then we did a video where we actually went through the detail and came up with different current amp hour draws for different components he's going to be putting into his build. Then we did a video on different battery options, lead acid versus AGM versus lithium ion. And this is the continuation of that series of, hey, let's get all this electrical stuff finalized so we can order it and then actually start the build process. And this video series is a little bit more of the sausage making, right? So this is the stuff that kind of goes on behind the scenes. These are largely unedited. Some of you may find them fascinating. Some of you may find them horribly boring. But it's intended to give you kind of an unfiltered look at all of the work and decisioning and thinking that has to go into building your own cargo trailer or camper. And Paul has been a fantastic guinea pig in that process. So with that,
Plus,
hey,
I'm getting
Paul.
free advice from JP, so that's good.
Well, it can't guarantee it's always good advice, but you knew that, right? That came with a broken warranty to start with. So thanks for letting us continue to have a magnifying lens into your process and in your thoughts. So you got a bunch of stuff kind of lined up in cart. You're ready to pull the trigger on buying a bunch of stuff, and then you've got a bunch of final decisions to make too. It sounds like.
I do. So, in large part on your recommendation, some of the components that I need, I've done a little bit of research. Most of it right now I've been able to find on Amazon. So, I have some of the core components, not all of them, but some of them in the cart. And then a few others that I think we need to discuss today.
Sounds good. You also, so out of the battery session, we talked about lead acid, AGM, and lithium ion. You were kind of starting to lean towards lithium ion because of the weight factor and the space factor. Sounded like two of the major decisions. And it sounds like you're kind of settling in on Bluetti is maybe the central kind of component of all of this from a battery perspective. You want to start there and look at Bluetti. I know you had a bunch of questions about kind of this, that, or the other on sizing and options and things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. So I'm really not a solar expert at all. So I'm learning as we go here. I went from searching, what do I need for solar? Some of the conversations we've had. So I'm very amateur here. So I did pull up. They have a few different models, and they seem like a great brand. I know that the Goal Zero is probably considered the gold standard, and it certainly is priced like the gold standard as well.
Right.
I'm looking for larger capacity. I think I'm aiming for not minimalist here. If I do camp with the kids, we will be drawing a little bit more. So I'm looking for something a little bigger. And so on their website, they have a couple models that I'm not exactly sure, JP, but they're 2,000 watt hours, I guess. And they have the surge usually up to, I guess it's 4,000. I guess that's for if you're pulling a lot in a shot, or if you're starting up something that pulls a lot. But there are a couple units, and I honestly don't know the difference between the two.
If you want, do you want to share your screen and we can just kind of talk through them?
Sure.
I don't think I have to do anything to give you permission.
I think
to
you
do that.
do. You have to give me permission there.
Oh, do I?
Yeah.
Let me see here. Paul. Let's make you. I'm going to make you the host.
Ooh.
I don't know if I do that. I don't know if it'll mess up the recording. See if you can
Does
just
that
share.
mean do I get to ask you questions?
Yeah, sure. See if it'll allow you to share now.
You've disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, well, that's no fun. Let's see. You guys are actually seeing kind of the real deal.
The real sausage making.
I don't know how to make you presenter.
If you can pull the website up, JP, and I can walk through it. If you want to do screen share too.
Let me. I'm just gonna make you the host. See what happens.
I am the host.
All right. So while you're pulling that up, it looks like it's still recording, so I think we're good. So I don't have personal experience with the Bluetti. I've got some experience through a friend with Jackery and a couple other brands. I've seen a lot of video reviews of Bluetti, and people seem to say really good things about them. Um, I think there are several that are in this category that are kind of uh, how would you say it? That all kind of have similar functions and features, and there's just kind of a few trade-offs and such. So out of our battery sizing exercise the other day, we came up with 265 amp hours, which equates to about 3,100 watts. And I see that you got a 2,000 watt pulled one pulled up here. So I'll give you my disclaimer. You're going to be budgeting some power. It may not be that bad though, because we did oversize the system a little bit. Um, so you got a 2,000 watt hour device pulled up here. They've changed the look of them a little bit. It looks like what are the big questions you have?
Well, there are a couple models, and right now I'm looking at the 2000. I think there is a 5100, the EP. So I'll pull that one up.
Oh my gosh, that's huge.
It's in basically a suitcase. But let's look at the 2000 watts for now. There's an AC 200P, which I'll pull up.
That's the one we just had up there.
Yeah.
Can we get to like a full list of specs instead of the summary list of specs here?
Yep.
Is there one
I'll
down
roll
below?
down to technical specs right here.
Yeah, that's what we're. All right. So 5 inputs for AC, solar, car, generator, and lead acid battery. AC 400 watt AC adapter. So in theory, 5 hours ought to charge this thing, right? So you're putting 400 watts into it. It'll take longer than that because it'll start to slow down towards the end, but it probably tells us down below. 12 or 24 volt car chargers, so 12 volts what we're looking for. Solar panel not included, 35 volts to 150 volts, max of 700 watts. So that's within spec of what we spec for you, so that's okay. You're not going to have a generator hooked up to this thing, we don't think. Lead acid, I mean, that you could actually probably wire it off your car battery and charge it at a max of 8.2 amps. That'll take a little bit of figuring out and doing there, but we'll kind of figure that out. What's it say? 2.7 hours to fully recharge. Oh, if you're on full solar and plugged in at the same time.
Right. And a question on this one, JP, is I wasn't sure, and again, I'm very amateur here, but is that typical that you can charge with solar and plug it in, or car and solar? Do most of these units, is
I don't
that
know if
typical?
most of them do, but there's nothing electrically that would prevent them from doing it, right? So you're pouring water into the tank through multiple spigots, if you will, and so yeah, I mean that's not uncommon. It's saying that it's a max of 1,200 watts though, so that means that you're putting 400 in through the wall charger and up to about 800 through other sources. So
Right.
you probably won't do that very often. But let's say that you are plugged into shore power somewhere where you're camping, and we've got it set up so that charges the battery as well, but at the same time you're still parked in the sun. That would be a scenario where you're getting power from multiple sources.
Right.
Um, 6 AC ports. I mean, that's awesome. I think
Yeah.
like the Goal Zero only has a couple.
I think 2 or 3. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's pure science, so charging laptops and sensitive electronics and things is cool.
Can you explain that one a little bit too, JP, for someone that might be this? I learned because there are cheaper ones out there that are not pure. They are more dangerous, I think, for more sensitive equipment, is what I understand.
Yes and no. Can you see the chalkboard behind me?
Yep.
I don't know if the chalkboard behind me is recording on the video or not. We'll see. But it's effectively a wave that looks like this, or a wave that looks like this. So alternating current, is basically at 60 cycles a second, roughly, kind of alternating one way or the other. And the modified sine is it's just cheaper to manufacture and do. And a lot of the sensitive electronics, though, are more kind of designed around this harmonic signature here. And so they, for things like the things they say that it matters the most are like a microwave, like if you're going to have a microwave oven, a laptop, a drone, some of those types of things. I've personally, I wouldn't recommend anybody do this, but I've personally had fine success charging my laptop off a modified sine inverter. I've charged my drone before I crashed it in Wyoming off of a modified sine inverter, and so if you were gonna be using all the time, running your laptop off of it, running a microwave oven off of it, I think the other one is if you're going to have an induction cooktop that you're going to run off this, then that pure sine is really, really important. If it's an occasional charge, I think you're probably okay. And like a lot of the applications that I ended up doing off grid is I would plug it in and charge it while I was driving somewhere. So the laptop wasn't actually running. I was just using it to put power in the battery. And then when I got to the spot, I ran the laptop off the battery.
Interesting. Okay. Mine, because they are a bit more expensive, I think, when you're looking specifically for that in an inverter.
Yep, they definitely like multiples more expensive.
Yes. Yeah.
You got you got a 25 amp DC port, a 10 amp DC port, and two 3 amp DC ports. Most of the stuff, if you remember from our list the other day, your lights are going to go on that 3 amp DC circuit. Your diesel heater probably needs to go on either the 10 amp or the 25 amp. We'll put your fridge on the opposite of that. So, if your fridge is on one, we'll put the diesel heater on the other, or we'll put the diesel heater and the fridge both on the 25 amp circuit, just so we don't overload that. But that's nice. You've got some circuit breakers built into these as well. I think we're planning on putting a fuse panel in anyway, just for safety's sake. But this is kind of, double protection, sort of like having a breaker box and having fuses as well.
Got it.
The USB-C fast charger, I mean, for the modern laptops and stuff, your laptop probably uses a USB charger. That is the fastest, most efficient way to charge your laptop. You'll definitely want to plug it into the USB-C port.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting, it supports wireless charging now. I don't have a fancy, my phone is at Sonom, and so it doesn't do wireless charging, but if you've got a new iPhone, it will. A lithium ion battery, lithium phosphate, I think is what that is, LF, lithium ferron phosphate, something like that. But look at that cycles, 3,500 plus cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Shelf life 3 to 6 months, meaning it'll hold a charge 3 to 6 months. And it has an MPPT solar controller built in. So that's not something we'll have to buy separately.
Yeah, I think this one has a nice little touch screen as well. So
yep. Interesting here in the charge times. It's basically doing the same exercise you and I did the other day on the whiteboard, but it's done for you. It'll run your fan overhead for 140 hours. Look at that. Your smartphone, it'll barely run longer than your fan. And I think people underestimate how much their phones and their tablets use, but it's a lot.
Yeah. And if it's an iPhone older than an iPhone 10, it'll take double that, because
there's probably the best part on all of this down below there, Paul. Size and weight. 16 by 11 by 15 and only weighs 60 pounds. So we weren't far off. We said 50. So we weren't far off at all. So this one looks pretty good. What was there a different one that you were comparing it against?
Yeah, so there's another one and I honestly, because I didn't know what to look for, I wasn't sure what the difference was. So this one here is the AC200P.
Okay.
So then there's another 2000 it's
EB2400.
2400, so it's a little bigger. This is what is the traditional, what they look like, I think, when you look at the
cheaper.
Yeah. So you want to go down to the technical?
So I've watched review videos on this one before. One of the things that people commented on this one before is that your DC ports and your USB ports are on one side and your AC ports are on the other.
Mm-hmm.
In your floor plan, that may not be as big of a deal. However, and you've got 2 AC ports instead of 6, right? That could be a big deal. But you know, if you wanted to put the back of it against the wall and have all of your wires coming into one side, the other one's probably a better choice. Just simply looking at how the plugs are laid out. This is the older model, I think. This is the one, like I said, I've seen review videos on before. So let's get into the technical specs real quick and just see if there's anything other than the physical layout that would cause us to go one way or the other.
So the ports obviously there's less, right?
Fewer ports, yep. And what's our because we're gonna be wiring a lot of stuff on our 12-volt ports. One 12-volt 9-amp port. Yeah, and have 2,500 cycles. And there's $100 worth of difference between these two.
Well, this one will be 400. It looks like this one's actually $400 off of that, so it's quite cheap. It'll be 1,400. The other one will be, what was it? Also 1,000 watts, 2,000 watts.
Yeah, so
And this one will be
this one's got
1,700.
This one has a smaller battery pack, so it's 400 watts smaller in battery pack. This one you have up on screen now. The inverter is twice the size, so it's a 2,000 watt inverter versus a 1,000 watt inverter. And this one is much more favorable from a ports configuration standpoint. You've got a lot more to work with here. One of the things I like about this one, just at a glance, is that it has a lot more DC ports for us to work with, which most of the stuff we're going to be running in your camper are going to run off DC ports. And so I'm initially kind of leaning towards this one, although it is a smaller battery capacity than the other one.
Can you add to these battery capacity? Because that's one of the challenges I have is with if we did, you know, the traditional battery, the heavier, more, you just add them, right? And you just connect them. With something like this, do I just buy a second one? And how would I do that if I find that this isn't enough?
I'm a partially informed opinion, right? I know with like the Gold Zeros, you can daisy chain them to some lead acid exterior capacity. With these, I don't know as much about. What you might end up doing is dividing your system in two, where you've got the most of your stuff running off this 2,000 watt hour, and then you've got a separate 500 watt device over the side that the kids charge their iPads off of or something. It's not an elegant load balancing solution like if you had a bunch of lead acid batteries, we just add an extra.
Okay. There's another product, I think it's a Titan.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Well, if you want to pull it up, I'm going to switch off my headset because it appears to be dying.
Okay, and I'll just pull it up here quick while we're.
All right, we should be back. Hopefully you can hear me now.
Yep.
Okay.
Titan Solar. And it was a little bit more expensive, but one of the solar kits here, I'll share screen on this one, is that this one's a pre-order, so that's why I dismissed it as well, because I wasn't able to get this
one.
Yeah,
I've seen this one. I saw a good review on this one.
Yeah, it looks really good, and let me see if I can find the details. But I remember saying they could add expandable. So here it is, completely expandable. So you can add multiple 2,000 watt battery packs. Now this one's bigger. This is a 3,000 watt inverter with a 2,000 watt hour battery.
Yeah. To be honest with you, Paul, to a 3,000 watt inverter, I mean, 3,000 watt inverter on a 2,000 watt hour battery pack is going to last you about 45 minutes if you're running it at 3,000 watts. And the things that you run, so big wattages, right, are going to be an induction cooktop. If you tried to run your AC, your roof unit AC off of this thing, any sort of electric heat at all, are what are going to be your big power draws. An electric coffee pot, but the thing about so you can get a 1,500 watt electric kettle to boil your coffee water on, which would run on the other one just fine. And it takes like 8 minutes to do. So even though it's running at 1,500 watts, it only runs for 8 minutes. And so, you have 2,000 watt hours. And so, you could even use an electric kettle off the other one. I don't know, based on what we talked about in your list, which will be in the sizing video that's in this series, you don't have anything that's going to draw anywhere near 3,000 watts.
Well, so and maybe that's something worth explaining to, well, I guess I understand it now, but at first I was confused with the inverter is really about the maximum coming in or mostly coming out. Mm-hmm. And what, if you have tools and it's not about the long haul, right? Camping is the long haul. You want bigger batteries and you're going to draw slow.
Yeah.
So some of these are made, it seems like, more for remote tools maybe, or something where if you have a couple hours of runtime, you're great. Whereas I'm more looking for low draw, but more battery.
Yeah.
So some of these are honestly not configured exactly right. And this is an example of that, right? It's meant to be able to pull fast and the battery's no bigger, right? It's still just a 2,000 watt.
Yeah. I mean, the easiest way to think about it, I think, is if you think about your inverter, that is the potential to do work, right? Or that is the amount of work that it can do at any given time. And then your battery size is for how long, right? So this can push 3,000, but it can only push it for 2,000 worth in an hour, which means you get 30 to 45 minutes. Most of your applications where you're running a fridge, your lights, for example, your lights are maybe 15 watts, those LED lights. And so 15 watts on a 2,000 watt hour battery capacity means, if it was 20 watts, you could run it for 100 hours, an LED light. And so, the inverter is the amount of work that it can effectively do at any given instant. And then the battery size is kind of for how long. I'm oversimplifying that a little bit, but you're right. In most of your camping, unless you're going to use an induction cooktop or something like that that's going to use electricity to heat, that's where you really start to use a lot of power, is when you use electricity to heat things. And so that's why you still see a lot of off-grid applications that use propane as the heat source or the cooking source, because it's hard to do off of battery and solar.
So I think the last one to compare, JP, is because this was the first one that started the conversation.
Yep.
And there's nothing perfectly comparable here. We have the 1,500 and the 3,000. Mm-hmm. I think, if anything, we felt that I probably need to be more towards the 3,000 than the 1,500.
Yep.
And so maybe as a final comparison, it might be worth taking a look at the Goal Zero at the 3,000.
Sure. And what's interesting is that all of these work out to be in about $1 per watt hour. 3,000 watt hours here is about $3,000. Your 2,000 watt from Bluetti that you like is about $2,000. The 1,500 is actually a little bit more for the Goal Zero here. And this one, I don't think has changed a lot in a while. This one will show fewer cycles if you look at the technical specs than the Bluetti.
Yep.
So somewhere in here, it'll say number of cycles on the battery, be in the battery specs. If you scroll down, everything else will be kind of similar. This says 500 cycles to reach to full 80% capacity. And that doesn't mean that 500 cycles and you're done. That means 500 cycles at 80% draw before you start to see degradation in the battery performance. So you'll still get thousands of cycles on this thing. It's a nickel metal cadride NMC, as opposed to the lithium phosphate on the other one. There's a different battery chemistry between these two, between this and the Bluetti. And quite frankly, this one is not as favorable on ports as the Bluetti. If I look at it real quick, so you've got, 12 volt up to 10 amp, 12 volt up to 13 amp, USB up to 20 volt, 5 to 20 volts. So you got a little bit more port control on the Bluetti. The only difference is this one's maybe just a little bit bigger than ultimately you would need. The Bluetti is just a little bit smaller than you would need. But
Curious
yeah.
on the weight. Did we see the weight on this one?
Let's look down in general. Dimensions 70 pounds, and that's basically that extra 1,000 watts of battery. 15 by 10 by whatever's under your mouse there, 23 or 13. So it's about the same size. Sounds like it's just heavier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's going to come down to the 2,000 versus the 3,000 watts.
Yep. I think either one of them will work, Paul. I think that you're going to, you on the 2,000, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, I wish I had a little bit more. And on the 3,000, you're going to say, yeah, this was just about right for a 2 or 3 day camping trip. But as long as you're prepared for a little bit of conservatism and budgeting, maybe you're running the Moonlight for 2.5 hours instead of 3 hours a night. I think you could figure out a way to make the Bluetti work. It will be a little small for your setup.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the big decisions that needs to be made. Now, I know there are a lot of other components that we need to look at as well, but I was leaning towards the Bluetti, but I don't want to sell myself short either. Both are portable. I'm open to both. I think bottom line, regardless which one we choose, the parts that we need to get don't change.
Yeah, I think that's largely true. The only difference is that we have more ports on the Bluetti, and so it might be easier for us to wire this and that or the other in different circuits. But yeah, largely the rest of the parts are the same. So yeah, and just on pure specs, right? So reputation, warranty, reliability, all those other things aside for a minute. On pure specs, the Bluetti port-wise and configuration-wise is an easier and better fit for your setup. The battery size is probably a little bit small, and the Goal Zero is a little bit less favorable on ports, but the battery size is a little bit more in line with where your draw expectations are. And the weight's obviously more favorable on this one, and the price is more favorable. I can't speak to the reliability of the Bluetti versus the Goal Zero, but the videos I've seen, the reviews have been good. So
yeah, so I think we probably need to talk about the other parts.
Sure. So we can probably tie a bow on this part, then kind of separate it out and make it a video, and then we can kind of transition and start a new video about the rest of the system and the parts and such. So we'll do that now.